The world mourns the passing of former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres, a visionary for peace. U.S. Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton looks for momentum following her first debate with Republican Donald Trump. And an American billionaire's ambitious plan to get humans to Mars by 2020. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening, I'm Esther Gidou-Ewart. This is Africa 54. Vincent Makori is off today. Tonight, world leaders are mourning the passing of former Israeli Prime Minister Shimon Peres, who died early Wednesday at 93, 2 weeks after suffering a severe stroke. Global diplomats and dignitaries are praising the Israeli giant as visionary who committed his life to the elusive goal of lasting peace in the Middle East. VOA's Richard Green has our report.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu offered words of praise for Peres early Wednesday, hours after news of his death was announced.
Shimon
dedicated his life to the sovereignty of our people. As a man of vision, his gaze was aimed to the future. As a man of security, he fortified Israel's strength in many ways, some of which even today is still unknown. As a man of peace, he worked until his final days toward reconciling with our neighbors for a better future for our children.
Born in present-day Belarus in 1923, Peres moved with his family to the future Jewish state when he was 11 years old, when it was known as British Palestine. He became Israel's youngest defense minister in 1952 at the age of 29 and was credited with working to develop Israel's defense and aerospace industries, along with its nuclear weapons program. Peres would go on to hold nearly every major Israeli political post during his long career, including prime minister twice, the presidency, defense minister, and foreign minister. His major achievement was as foreign minister with the Oslo Accords, a deal for Palestinian self-rule for which Peres, then Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, and the late Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat shared the 1994 Nobel Peace Prize. His son, Hemi Peres, paid tribute to his father.
He worked tirelessly for Israel from the very first day of the state to the last day of his life.
After leaving public office, Peres founded the Peres Peace Center, which develops joint economic, educational, and cultural projects with the Palestinians, Egypt, and Jordan. Richard Green, VOA News, Washington.
Israel's foreign ministry says a long list of world leaders are expected to attend Shimon Peres' funeral on Friday, including U.S. President Barack Obama, Bill and Hillary Clinton, Prince Charles, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Israel's parliament has lowered its flags to half-staff as preparations are being made for Peres' body to lie in state in front of the Knesset building on Thursday. Now to the race for the U.S. presidency. Democrat Hillary Clinton is hoping for a boost in the polls after her first debate with Republican Donald Trump. A CNN ORC poll right after the debate found that 2/3 of those asked thought Clinton did a better job in the debate, the first of the three between the two White House contenders. VOA national correspondent Jim Malone reports on the debate's possible impact.
Hillary Clinton appeared to have an extra spring in her step as she greeted supporters in North Carolina the day after putting in a strong performance in the first presidential debate.
Did anybody see that debate last night? Oh, yes. One down, two to go.
Clinton put Donald Trump on the defensive for much of Monday night's debate, pressing him on why he won't release his tax returns and his role in questioning President Barack Obama's citizenship.
He has really started his political activity based on this racist lie that our first black president was not an American citizen.
Trump only recently declared he accepts that the president was born in the U.S. after years of trying to raise doubts.
And I think I did a great job and a great service, not only for the country, but even for the president in getting him to produce his birth certificate.
Secretary Clinton.
Trump told supporters in Miami he thought the debate went well, even though earlier he complained about both the debate moderator and his microphone. Trump also noted recent polls that show him gaining on Clinton.
It's been amazing, the support we're getting more and more and more. And, you know, I won Florida in the primaries, and we're doing very well now. We're leading Florida right now.
Clinton's strategy to put Trump on the defensive during the debate paid dividends, says analyst Matthew Dallek.
I think it was a pretty clear victory for her on multiple levels, and that I think it, will ultimately be seen, if I were to guess, I think it will ultimately be seen as having an impact at being an unimportant moment in a pretty long and deeply contentious election cycle.
But Dallek says it remains to be seen how the debate will affect undecided voters.
It doesn't, I don't think, necessarily hurt him, obviously, with his core supporters, but it's hard to see how he wins over, how he grows his base of support.
Despite the positive reviews, Clinton still has work to do to address her weakness on the issue of trust, says Andra Gillespie via Skype.
She's going to have to figure out ways to craft an image of herself that is trustworthy, that has worked past some of her mistakes.
The next presidential debate is scheduled for October 9th. Jim Malone, VOA News, Washington.
Nationalists in France are the latest group to get a boost from anti-immigrant sentiment that's rising across Europe. Here's VOA's Europe correspondent, Luis Ramirez.
There are fewer of them in the Mediterranean Sea these days. The rickety boats and dinghies that ferried more than 1 million refugees and migrants to Europe last year. With winter approaching, the perils grow. But that's not stopping desperate people from risking their lives to reach Europe. Though down by 50%, refugee flows are expected to continue at their current levels. The main reason? The intractable conflict in Syria.
Have the drivers, have the root causes of forced movement, have they changed? And I think the answer is clearly, given the state right now of the Syrian ceasefire, clearly the root causes have not changed.
It is not just Syrians dying while fleeing to Europe. The latest tragedy? A boat carrying 600 migrants capsized off the coast of Egypt last week. The bodies of women and children were among the some 170 retrieved.
This is a tragedy. People are dying needlessly because our policies are basically end up indirectly and inadvertently subsidizing the smugglers because they're pushed into their hands.
World leaders gathered in New York last week pledged to more than double the number of refugees they take in legally, with the U.S. raising its cap to 110,000 a year.
I'm heartened by the commitments that have been made here today. They will help save lives. But we're going to have to be honest, it's still not enough. Not sufficient for a crisis of this magnitude.
A fragile ceasefire in Syria collapsed last week after Syrian jets bombed a UN aid convoy, and the Syrian government announced a new military offensive in rebel-held Aleppo. Syrians account for 28% of refugees in Europe this year, and with no end in sight to the conflict now in its 6th year, the trend is likely to continue. For VOA correspondent Masoud Farivar, I'm Steve Baragona.
And that was Steve Baragona on the latest on the refugee crisis in Europe. And in recent months, the number of refugee migrants fleeing to Europe has dropped by 50% compared with last year. But the International Organization for Migration, the world's leading migration agency, says the current refugee flows are likely to continue as long as the Syrian conflict remains unresolved. Steve Baragona tells us more.
Like the famed stained glass in Chartres' ancient cathedral, the population of France has many facets. Away from the city center, this is the newer face of France. Immigrant workers, many from Muslim countries whose parents the country once welcomed as cheap labor, now speak of discomfort and rejection after a series of Islamist terror attacks.
We are afraid that the angry extreme right will hit us. Now I go into a cafe and people look at me strangely. For example, I'm the son of Kurds, nothing to do with religion. I'm Muslim but not observant. But in France, because of the news, of TV, politics, there are so many things that have changed against foreigners, totally.
In the wake of the attacks, a backlash against immigrants, especially those who are Muslim, can be seen in growing support for the National Front, the party of immigration critic Marine Le Pen.
Marine Le Pen a eu un discours constant. On ne peut pas lui reprocher.
Marine Le Pen has had a constant message that one cannot say has been anything but clear. Immigration must be severely regulated. We must regain control of our borders and abandon the Schengen zone, which has been very catastrophic.
Qui est catastrophique.
In its stance against porous borders, in Europe's case Schengen, and immigration, the National Front finds common ground with other nationalists on the continent and across the sea. Not only in Chartres, but elsewhere in France, Muslim immigrants interviewed believe a victory by U.S. presidential candidate Donald Trump could further encourage French voters to support anti-immigrant populists.
Et ça va créer du racisme, ça va créer des problèmes en Amérique aussi, en même temps en France.
It'll create more racism and it'll create problems in America and in France as well. The National Front will gain support in France. Why? Because if he wins, that will cause the French to change their way of thinking and say, why should we not do the same as the Americans?
Some, but not all, Muslim immigrants here in Chartres agree.
If he becomes president, that will mean he will spread his trash throughout. No, he will not.
As in other parts of France, here the topic of Muslim immigrants and their families is a touchy one. Chartres was the hometown of one of the attackers last November in Paris. Some longtime residents say they choose not to let that or other events change the way they see their Muslim neighbors.
Me, I'm not a racist. A Muslim is a Muslim, a Christian is a Christian. We do not have the same point of view, but everyone should respect the other and everything will go better in the world. Unfortunately, not everyone thinks like I do.
While we found no one who supports Trump among French Muslims here, there was little love for his opponent. Many blame Hillary Clinton for the Middle East policies of the current U.S. administration, of which she was a part, arguing intervention in the region helped give rise to the new terrorists, with whom ordinary Muslims are sometimes conflated. Luis Ramirez, VOA News, Chartres, France.
We want to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa54 and check out our headlines 24/7 on voaafrica.com. Coming up, is the West losing the information war? A dire warning from NATO commanders. Stay with us.
Health news and notes. This is Living Better.
Living to be 100 is no big deal in Acciaroli. In this village in southern Italy of only 2,000 people, 300 residents have lived for a century or more. Researchers want to know why. Amina Fodolo is 93. We eat a lot of fish and fresh produce and olive oil, she says. These are components of the Mediterranean diet known to researchers since the 1950s. Now, Italian and American scientists like Alan Mizell are trying to find out if there's something in addition to what the locals eat that makes them live so long.
Is there something in their genes that may, along with something they do, make them live longer and healthy?
Researchers looked at 80 elderly people from Acciaroli who are physically active and also breathe unpolluted air and live stress-free lives, factors researchers are trying to understand for their possible roles in longevity. I'm Martin Seacrest for VOA's Living Better.
In today's business report, the African Development Bank is going to lend $4.1 billion to Nigeria in various areas. With more details on the plan, Nigeria's economy, and where the money is going to be invested, we go to Africa 54 business correspondent Jill Malandrino in New York. Hello, Jill.
Hi there. So ADP's president, Dr. Akinwumi Adesina, he said funds over the next 2 years would be used to develop the power and agricultural sectors in Nigeria, aiding a move away from the country's reliance on oil revenue. The economy has been shrinking due to the plunge in crude oil prices, which generate 70% of government revenue. Also, attacks on energy facilities in the Niger Delta have cut crude production by around 1/3 since the beginning of the year. This has left Nigeria struggling to fund a record nearly $19 billion budget. In addition, the government wants to triple expenditures in an effort to improve infrastructure and power supply, and that money needs to come from somewhere.
You know, Jill, the reports also say that ADB's portfolio in Nigeria will actually increase to a total of $10 billion by 2019. But that sounds like a lot of money if you look at the economy, which has actually failed to emerge from the oil slump.
That's an excellent point, and at first blush, I thought the same thing. But Adesina made an important observation about debt versus liquidity, which are two very different things. He said there is no debt crisis in Nigeria. What you have is a liquidity problem, and ADB is trying to help the country drive down inflation and work with the government to provide incentives to the private sector. If you want to come out of recession, you need more than just government. You need the private sector. So incentives are very important to inject that liquidity. In other words, liquidity means cash for investment.
But Jill, looking continentally, the common theme there is to improve infrastructure. But how will this drive the economy? Can you cite some of the examples in the continent and where we can find those?
There's an old adage that you have to spend money to make money, and that applies from small businesses to complex government balance sheets. It's a process that takes time to play out, but we're seeing results in regional pockets, which is a great start. And we are now seeing a big push for institutional investment in Africa across multiple sectors that are primed for growth over the next several decades. This push is not only good for the economy, but it also shines a spotlight on continued health and education efforts, as well as women-owned business growth.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you.
Jill Malandrino reporting live from New York. NATO commanders are calling on the West to step up its efforts to combat and counter the information war being waged by its adversaries. The commanders warn that countries like Russia are exploiting the freedom of the press in Western media to spread disinformation. Here's Henry Ridgewell.
The vanguard of Russia's forceful takeover of Crimea in 2014, the unmarked, heavily armed gunmen, now widely known as the Little Green Men. Moscow initially denied they were Russian military, yet weeks later, similar unidentified armed units appeared in eastern Ukraine. The simultaneous deployment of disinformation and military power has become known as hybrid warfare. Speaking at this month's United Nations General Assembly, Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko said such tactics are being waged against the whole Western world.
Political pressure, blatant propaganda, interference with the electoral process, economic cohesion, secret subversive and military operation, cyber attack, misuse of diplomatic measures. These are modern and convenient methods of the undeclared war.
At a conference on information warfare at the London-based Royal United Services Institute this week, NATO's Director of Strategic Communications said the West is playing catch-up.
The technology is ours. The marketing powerhouses are in our countries. Yet we're having this discussion against the feeling of being pushed by different actors, Russia, Daesh, also China, in more subtle ways.
The conference focused on the growing reach of Russian state media, such as the 24-hour news channel Russia Today, or RT, often accused of being a propaganda outlet for the Kremlin. Senior editor at The Economist, Edward Lucas, argued channels like RT should not be considered as journalism.
Russia has really grasped the post-truth environment, and they will lie about things absolutely brazenly. They understand the weaknesses of our media in the post-Cold War environment, that we prioritise fairness over truth.
Lucas said the West should do more about what he termed social media hygiene.
There's a real problem with comment fields and with fake social media accounts, particularly on Twitter. The Russians are putting lots and lots of money into creating tens of thousands of trolls.
NATO officials said Russia includes information strategy as a key pillar of its conflict planning, but in the West it is often handed off to separate public relations teams.
We are still fighting on the margins, when actually a properly funded strategic communication effort is incredibly cheap compared to other costs.
Leahy warned Russia was deploying disinformation and hybrid warfare in its intervention in Syria, most recently in the disputed bombing of an aid convoy outside Aleppo earlier this month. He added the West must learn how to fight back. Henry Ridgewell for VOA News, London.
Nigeria is facing tough economic times, and analysts say this is just one of the many challenges facing the government of President Muhammadu Buhari. VOA House reporter Ladan Ibrahim interviewed President Buhari on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly, and he joins us now. Ladan, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you, Esther.
Well, most Nigerians are saying they are unable to put food on the table. And I'm just wondering, in your discussion, what measures is President Buhari proposing to take?
Yeah, knowing that Nigeria's economy is a mono-economic, the president said he is going to diversify this time around and is going to give agriculture a priority. And that is the program he initiated as it is. That's his take on this issue. That they've initiated a program that where they will assist farmers in the country. And what they are going to give them is not fiscal cash, but they provide them with the farm implement, because giving them cash, that will translate to more wives. That is what the president jokingly say, that if we give fiscal cash, then people there is a possibility they will go and marry. But instead, show us your land, we clear it for you, we provide you with the farm implement, we provide you with the seed. After you sell your products, we translate that items we give you into money, you come and pay government. Then a follow-up question to that, I asked him, Mr. President, knowing that I'm a Nigerian and I know the policies of Nigeria, some policies will be conceptualized, but its continuity and sustainability remain to be another issue. The president said, yes, he knows, but you are the people who knows that. I say, what evidence are you giving Nigerians that the direct beneficiaries of this program or policy will get to them? He said he assured us that in Nigeria, Nigerian central government, in collaboration with the Federal Minister of Agriculture and the Minister of Agriculture, they are on and off as far as this issue is concerned. And they are hoping that by the end of next year, what they are going to do in the next coming year should double or triple even what they did this first year. So in essence, the president is saying agriculture is going to be the priority, and they've initiated that program.
Let's hope, Ladan, that takes place, because most people want to put food on the table. But then again, there have been talks over the years now about negotiations with Boko Haram militants. Where are the negotiations now, according to the president?
Very well. I raised this issue with him, Esther, and the president's take on this was that, yeah, the issue of Boko Haram, he gave directives up to 3 times, but negotiation breaks somewhere along the line. But this time around, he is no longer going to give any directives as far as negotiation is concerned. Whoever wants to negotiate with on the issue of Boko Haram, those people should come out in the open and say, yeah, we are the militant, we are the Boko Harams, we are their leaders. Then it is then that the president say he can go again ahead to give another round of another negotiation. But if not, the situation, the measure they took now, that is what is going to be. Then I follow it again with another question on the issue of the militant, the Niger Delta, who are creating a lot of problems as far as the pipelines of the gas is concerned, which is one of the major sources of electricity. I asked the president, is government ready to negotiate with the militant in Niger?
And his answer was, they're not going to negotiate yet? Do they?
Yeah, the president said, yeah, so it depends on them. It all depends. If they are ready for negotiation, are open.
So lack of clear leadership on the part of the militants is holding up the negotiations.
Very well.
Ladan, thank you very much. Ladan Ibrahim is VOA House Service reporter. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. Insider billionaires plan to colonize Mars. We'll be right back.
If you've just joined us, I'm Mariama Diallo, and here is a quick recap of today's headlines. In Gabon, Ali Bongo is sworn in as the country's president, calling for unity after a disputed election win that sparked deadly unrest and divisions in the country. In Somalia, a journalist working for a popular Mogadishu radio station is killed by an unidentified gunman while visiting his parents. In Kenya, police fire live ammunition and tear gas to disperse multimedia university students protesting over road safety. Finally, in Ethiopia, the country celebrates a festival marking the ancient discovery of a cross by Queen Helena, believed to be the one upon which Jesus was crucified. That's all for today. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
Welcome back. Here's what's trending. SpaceX CEO Elon Musk envisions 1,000 passenger ships flying en masse to the red planet well within the next century, Battlestar Galactica style. The Pretoria-born billionaire outlined his plan to establish a self-sustaining city on Mars during a speech in Mexico. He wants to make humans a multi-planetary species by colonizing the red planet. Musk noted that SpaceX already has begun work on the Mars colonial fleet, recently test-firing a powerful new rocket engine named Raptor. His goal is to get the price down so anyone could afford to go, with a ticket costing no more than a house on Earth. Meanwhile, back on Earth, China's largest ride-sharing taxi app, Didi, is investing $10 million in China's leading bike-share platform, Ofo Bicycle. Ofo has nearly 70,000 bikes shared every day among over 1.5 million users in 20 cities. Ofo is among a number of startups that are applying mobile internet technology to optimize biking resources on China's campuses and in urban areas not serviced by public transportation. And finally, once the stars of video gaming were Mario, Sonic, and Lara Croft. But now, thanks to online video services like YouTube and Twitch, ordinary gamers are finding fame online. UK-based The Yogscast is a collective of gaming fans which broadcasts to an audience of over 20 million YouTube subscribers. The family of over 20 different YouTube channels featuring mainly gaming content and videos related to playing games with friends. Together, they became the first UK-based YouTube channel to hit 1 billion views. And that's what's trending today. And that's our show for today. Thank you for watching and good night from Washington.
Welcome to the Voice of America's Newswords.
Here is a story that has to do with defects or problems with cars.
Listen for the word that means to take back something. Recall.
They had meetings over this defect. They shared complaints over this defect. Yet there was no investigation by the government and no recall by General Motors until 10 years later.
Recall. It is a word that means to ask people officially to return something.
In our story, there were major problems with some General Motors cars. The man says the U.S. government and the car company took too long to issue a recall, so the cars could be fixed.
Now, when you hear the word recall, your American English will be good enough to know what this news word means.